Hello, everyone, and welcome to this special edition of No Talks live from the London Book Fair 2023. We have 6 No Talks that will be spread over 3 days, where we will be having two no talks each day that will cover topics related to the future of creative content, and which goes with the theme of this year's London Book Fair. Our topics are, they relate to storytelling, entertainment, IP, intellectual property, innovation, creativity, and others. So I am happy to kick off this No Talks edition with Maria Ingold, CEO of Mireality, with this session that will be titled Storytelling, the Tactile Transformation. I'm just going to say a few words about Maria, and I prefer that she introduces herself because she does it in such a good way. So just few words about Maria. Maria is a storytelling expert, where she has worked on combining technology with like storytelling, visual and art story. And a fun fact about her is that she is a BAFTA judge, and we'll know more about Maria. And also she'll be providing us with an overview of her thoughts on the impact of technology on storytelling. So the floor is yours, Maria. But before you proceed, I just want to remind our audience that Q&A, that there will be a Q&A segment after Maria's presentation, and I invite you all to share all your questions in the Q&A box. And you are also ready to answer any technical questions. The floor is yours, Maria.
Thank you so much. So welcome everyone to Storytelling, the Tactile Transformation. I'm Maria Ingold, and my background is mixing computer science and fine art. I was the first person at my university to do so. So I've taken that to really move my career forwards in the beginning of innovating multimedia, to computer games, to streaming. And as you pointed out, I'm also a BAFTA voting member, so I watch over 150 films a year. And for those of you who don't know what BAFTA is, it's similar to the Academy, and we vote for the film awards annually. I'm also an occasional actor, and I am an aspiring writer. I am working on my novel trilogy at the moment. So one of the things when I was first approached about putting this together, I was thinking, okay, impact of technology on storytelling. And I thought, well, one of the obvious things to do is to look at something like ChatGPT, which is an artificial intelligence that is now doing things around, various things, including you can put together stories and things like that. So I thought, what does this remind me of? And I thought, well, this really reminds me of Star Trek, Dr. Beverly Crusher on Next Generation, talking to the computer, trying to figure out and solve a problem, or maybe Spock sitting there trying to solve a problem. And I thought, okay, I'll put this into DALL-E, which is also by OpenAI, like ChatGPT. And it gave me, I put in a prompt, and it gave me 4 pictures of men working on a laptop. And I thought, okay, there's some bias built into the artificial intelligence. So I changed that and added female, and I added the Star Trek computer on the Enterprise. And it brought back some pictures of women, but still on using computers. So one of the things to be really conscious of is that there is still bias built into some of these algorithms. So, and in images, it's much more obvious than just in text. And the other thing to consider is that ethics is a part of this too. So the source material that this comes from, the artists and the photographers who create the content, their content is now being used to train algorithms. So there's a whole debate about that. And we'll go into a little bit about that as I go on. So creation. One of the core parts of creation in storytelling is that you can use artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence is the ability of a computer or machine to perform activities that normally a person would do. So a few of these would include things like computer vision or natural language processing to process speech or to process text. There's also translation and machine learning, which we'll go more into, and of course, things like robotics. But how does that affect us in storytelling? So in storytelling, we have, for instance, research. So we can use natural language processing, talking to a chatbot like I did with ChatGPT. We can use it for generating. We can use it for generating plot or characters or even dialogue. It's not always great yet. It's the same as what we're seeing with writing, but sometimes it can be quite interesting. Artificial intelligence is also really useful for things around analysis and the prediction of, for instance, of success. Optimization is another part here. So it can optimize advertising, promotional materials. Personalization is also key, bringing that content more uniquely to specific readers and viewers. Interactivity as well. So, for instance, choosing your own adventure kind of narratives. And of course, accessibility. Key here is to remember that editing is still required, and you often have to fact check. They often say that AI tends to hallucinate, but I haven't come across that yet, but I've certainly seen things where it needs more confirmation just to make sure the data is up to date. So let's look at an example. So when I was putting together this presentation, I thought, heck, if I'm talking about artificial intelligence, I need to go and actually talk to an artificial intelligence. So I decided to chat with ChatGPT when I was putting this presentation together. Now, I still spent a lot of time putting all of this together, but what I did find is that I could chat with it in fast, natural language. It behaved as if it were a research assistant for me. It was great as a sounding board, and it really helped me refine and improve my presentation. So some of the things I did was try to look at what kind of title should I use. So I asked it some questions, and then it came back with titles, and we refined that over time. And I still didn't like the titles it was coming back with, but I knew that I'd liked some aspects of the title that was originally proposed for this. And I knew what pieces I didn't like that it was giving me. So it really helped me refine that. So with DALL-E as well. Sometimes it's missing context, and sometimes things aren't completely up to date. So you have to really check and make sure that there aren't any data inaccuracies in what you're. So let's dig a little bit deeper into machine learning. That's about training algorithms so that you can train so it could do things like pattern recognition or sentiment analysis, recommendations, predictions, and of course, classification of text. So with respect to storytelling specifically, that means insights, so character arcs and narrative structures. It can understand emotions, do recommendations, figure out the success of something, and of course, classify. So let's look at an example. So Scriptbook is a piece of software that they claim is 3 times more effective at identifying box office hits than industry. it does this analysis using 400 data points on the story and does so with what they claim is 87% accuracy. Now, what's key about what they're saying is that the greatest predictor of success is a great story. Now, you can combine that with other things like what Synalytic does, which is talent analytics and release strategies. So together, you could actually really improve the success of something without having to first film it. But there are some considerations there. So there could be the consideration that this might be like other things that have already been done, and that could really hurt creativity going forwards. There's also bias in data sets. So there aren't that many female directors who've won Oscars. And so the prediction of success may start including some bias. So it's very important to be aware of that. By the same group is Deep Story. So Deep Story now allows you to create scripts based on other scripts. So you can do something that says, this is the same software that we predicted success with other scripts. So let's try using it to write something. Now it could help with things like writer's block, and it certainly follows a formatted structure, but it's going to be derivative. For instance, this specific example uses Superbad, and it's going to be derivative of things like that. There's also the bias, as we discussed previously, and crucially, the thing having a big impact is the ethics and copyright around this. While the software developers will say that they're not asking for copyright, what does copyright really mean in this sense? So let's look at a couple of examples. The Screen Actors Guild has been looking at this, and they've got a couple of concerns. So one is around deep fakes, and essentially what they're saying is if you want to recreate an actor in artificial intelligence, you need to license that likeness by negotiating the guild for that. And if you use their algorithm, again, there needs to be on that too. Moving on of America, they have just this morning announced that they're striking with about 98% do so in response to artificial intelligence. The concerns are the generation of artists, the writing can be used as source material, the specific style of a copyright. So on distribution, let's first, now you can see that there are a lot of different companies involved in this. There's certainly a lot more than there was 10 years ago, and there's a lot of different commercial models that are out there as well. So what that means is it's good for content creators in a way, because there are a lot of different places where you can create something that might have a really niche market for something that you're writing. So that's very helpful. And then the content models means that there's different ways of monetizing that. We're just going to look at that in a bit more detail on the next slide. So here, there's a number of different ways you can consume content. If you're looking at something linearly, then that means that it's scheduled. So with a scheduled content, that means it has to fit into a specific time slot. So that's different than things that are on demand. For anyone who's seen The Mandalorian recently, you'll know that not all episodes of The Mandalorian are the same length. That's because some stories don't need the same amount of time to tell them. So the way that you are using the technology changes how your format that you might be using. Now, out of the delivery mechanisms, the one that's becoming most popular is OTT or over the top. And that's that tends to be a direction that a lot of things are going on. We'll look a little bit at that next as well. But also here, there are different models for how you pay for something. So one can be a payment model, and that doesn't tend to use advertising. And the other is an advertising model. And if it's an advertising model in the old days, you used to have to design content to have ad breaks built into the design. Nowadays, at least with dynamic ad insertion, you have context-aware advertising that can also be tailored to the viewers who are to viewers and less disruptive to the content. So if we have a look at how things are performing in the industry, online video is where all of the subscriber growth is. And in terms of revenue generation, online ad supported is where the revenue growth is. So that has an impact on what companies are doing. So let's look at Netflix next as an example. So Netflix will today announce its Q1 results. But over the last few quarters, its year-on-year revenue growth has been declining. So it's been looking at ways to improve that year-on-year revenue growth. One of the things is something that we call subscription fatigue. And subscription fatigue means that some users only have one or two things that they subscribe to at home, but may have more that they use that are advertising based or free. That's because people own so much time and so much money. So everybody wants more of a share of that. So they're trying to figure out how to monetize that using hybrid things now for adding advertising in addition to subscription, which is what Netflix is doing. The other key thing is that once you have a subscriber, you want to keep them. You don't want to lose them. So Netflix became not just a distributor, but also a content creator. So when you look back at 2022, the top 15 in streaming across all streaming services in terms of viewing hours, most of those, all of them red, are Netflix. So Netflix really dominated streaming, and it's really investing in creating great original or first run content. Now, if you look at the other part of it, half of those were things that were created directly and owned by Netflix, and the others are those that are produced by others. But content isn't the only key thing here. The other one is context. So context means that Netflix has been using data-driven storytelling. So it's identifying patterns in that viewing behavior. And that is around several different areas. One of them is it's in analysis. So it's looking at how consumers are watching that content, what their preferences are, what their habits are when they're watching it. And then it's taking all of that to create new content. So it's deciding what to produce, what to acquire, what storylines, what genres, which talent is most popular. And then it's planning the marketing campaigns and when to release that in order to optimize it. Finally, when you get onto the service, it's then recommending you the content that's appropriate for what your interests are, and then measuring that, analyzing it, determining if it's been successful, and then feeding that back into the entire content creation and distribution strategy. So moving on to the final piece, which is engagement. One of the key pieces in there is transmedia storytelling. Now, transmedia storytelling is world building. That's where you're creating an entire world with story, with a storyline, and it across platforms. So the consistency of the story is each might have thing tell, still part of that same world. Participation in it. So, or collab. And there's also interactivities we'll get onto in the next piece. Adding Last of Us. So The Last of Us there's a lot of discussion right now about how games are impacting other media and others here. In 2013, it came out as a computer game. It then came out as a comic book. Then there was an expansion pack, a remaster for PlayStation 4, a sequel that came out. And just last year, they rebuilt the entire game to take advantage of PlayStation 5. And this year, of course, it's just come out as a TV series on HBO. So why is The Last of Us quite so important? Well, part of it is because over time, we've been doing a lot of converting game intellectual property into TV and films. But most recently, it's become much more interesting to the viewers, so that perception of quality is actually improving. Now, The Last of Us had an IMDb rating of around 9. So that's much higher than a lot of other things. So what is it doing right? And what's making it successful? So again, looking at some of those transmedia elements, its story came out to universal acclaim in 2013. So out of 98 critic reviews, its average score was 95%. People were raving about how good the narrative, the gameplay, the characterization all was. Also, in terms of platform, something that comes from a game is going to be really plot driven. It's got lots of things are going to happen. There will be action, there will be characterization, story. So that's really going to help. And crucially, the writer of the game actually co-wrote and co-produced it for television as well, which makes real difference in terms of consistency of story across the different platforms. For audience, of course, it's come from something where there's a real audience engagement in games. So 37 million units of the games were sold by the end of 2022. And the finale had 40 million viewers, and there was an average of 30 million viewers throughout. So it's a very engaged audience that is crossing over here. And then if you remember back to what we were talking about before, talent is also a predictor of success. So the talent, both of them come from Game of Thrones, and Pedro comes from Star Wars as well. So why is this engagement piece important? Well, if we actually, this is a slide from Omdia, which does fantastic research. The gamers are across a range of countries. If you look at gamers versus non-gamers, gamers are actually more engaged with cinema, over-the-top streaming delivery, and pay TV than non-gamers. What that seems to be telling me is that engagement in storytelling seems to be driving a greater desire for more storytelling. Now, you may think, okay, well, gamers, yeah, but how many of them are there? Well, if you look across a variety of countries, there are more gamers than there are cinema goers. So this is a much larger audience to draw from. And then what difference does that engagement make? Because other people are going to be looking at, how do we drive success here? So in 2027, gaming revenues for globally are predicted to overtake pay TV revenues to the tune of $215 billion. So we have that moving forward. There's also other areas that are growing. So advertising is growing and online video is growing, but cinema is mostly going to stay flat. So you can see here that engagement does make a difference in where revenue growth is going next. speaking of what's going next, where is storytelling going? So I had a chance to talk recently with a company called Charisma AI. And there's the aspect of immersion and interactivity as well to engagement. So that could be virtual reality, it could be computer games, it could be the metaverse. But one of the things that we're also seeing is artificial intelligence is being used further in storytelling. So Charisma just recently acquired the rights to John Wyndham's The Kraken Wakes. And this now incorporates artificial intelligence, so you can talk to the game characters as well as type to them. And rather than having sort of an A or B choice like Bandersnatch, you can really interact with the story. And they've also got an example out that's an interactive comic book that you can play on your phone, where you can actually type things in and talk with the customers, talk with the players in there directly. So that's making a real difference that we'll start seeing a lot more of going forward into the future. So just to summarize again, what we've talked about is creation. So a good story is the highest predictor of success, and artificial intelligence and machine learning can be used to both improve that content creation to make better decisions about what content to go forwards with on what types of platforms. Distribution, again, great content is essential, but also important is the right context and the right time. And data-driven insights are being used to help optimize the platforms and the monetization around that. And finally, in engagement in storytelling drives desire. And that's across things like transmedia, immersive, and interactive storytelling. So there we are, storytelling, the tactile transformation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maria. I'm just gonna keep this on the screen for now, just for some takeaways. But that was really informative, and you presented facts and some facts that are really amazing, like the number of gamers is higher than that of cinema goers.
I know it doesn't seem like that's the case, but often it is.
True. And we have been getting many questions in 3 languages, where we have live interpretation into French and Arabic as well. And I had prepared questions, but I will try to take as many questions from the audience as I can. But before those questions, like hearing you, I had one question that, like, can you share with us, like, what's your favorite film of all time?
Oh gosh. You know, one of the films that I keep coming back to is Hidden Figures. It's just such, I don't care who you are, what gender you are, you know, if you're Black, white, you know, it doesn't matter. What it is a film about curiosity and the desire to make things happen, and the diversity of thought drives innovation. And it's just such a powerful film and so inspirational for everyone.
I haven't seen it, but
I completely recommend it. I mean, it's about the women who mathematicians and engineers and computer scientists who got us into space.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Actually, some people argue that traditional forms of storytelling, like books and films, will become obsolete with the rise of technologies. What is your perspective on this? I know you have mentioned that you are currently writing your trilogy, and about Gothic.
It's been described as a modern Gothic fairy tale, and it's based on the legends of North London. Yeah. So, do I think these mediums are going to disappear? You know, if you look back at storytelling was an oral tradition, and then we invented writing systems, you know, and now we have books, and now we have films and TV shows and games. I think it's everything's going to change over time, but the desire to tell a story is always going to be there. But now we have artificial intelligence that also wants to tell stories.
True. But like, I see technology as like a magic wand that you can use. It's not like a tool, but a magic wand to get on with our storytelling.
Yeah, I mean, that was the Dr. Beverly Crusher from Star Trek sort of feeling that I had in my head, was that we work with technology. Technology can do it's still at this point being prompted to create things. But I think, yeah, it's something where we can collaborate and use it to help us. But I think our own innovation and the things that we come up with is still absolutely essential.
Yes, and the slide you had on ChatGPT with the advantages and disadvantages, like I totally agree with you. It is a research assistant, that like a great research assistant, but at the end of the day, it's a research assistant. It is assisting us with the information, but we need to make sure that it is correct, and to see that it is not biased, and other considerations.
Yes.
Yes, you have mentioned ethical considerations, but like, what are some potential risks associated with technology enhancing storytelling?
What kind of risks?
Yes.
Well, it's, you know, of course, there's the ethical considerations of that. There's also the derivative considerations, because it's using a machine learning model to figure out how to write stories. So it's basing its storytelling on the things that other people have created. Now, you could argue that, yes, but when you go to university, you study all the great writers, for instance, and you're inspired by the books that you read. So I think, you know, there's a lot of debate that we still have to have around this. But I think, you know, just in the last day, somebody won a photo competition by submitting a photograph generated by artificial intelligence, and then told the organizers, hey, this was created by AI. And they were honest about that. And when you look at the photograph, it's haunting, but there's also something unnatural about it. But that will change over time. So, you know, what does that mean going forwards is something that we're going to have to discuss. And we're going to see a lot more of artificially intelligent stories being submitted, art being submitted, photography. And we're going to have to figure out what that means. Is it another tool, or is it something else entirely?
Yes. And here, like, technology, like, is it a tool, or sometimes technology is the story? Technology is itself.
Yeah, that's why I was using ChatGPT as part of this, because I thought I would be completely remiss to tell a story about artificial intelligence and not to have a chance to talk with an artificial intelligence. So I'm actually quite fond of ChatGPT. I was very polite to it. It was very polite back. And it's very good at giving feedback in a very constructive way. So I thought it was a really positive experience.
Apparently you see ChatGPT as a he. I keep saying she. I don't know.
It's funny. I do think of it as, it reminds me of conversations with my dad. He is a rocket scientist, and he's very good at giving feedback.
Okay. We have an interesting question from the audience. So in our agenda, we have a session about intellectual property rights. But having mentioned several elements related to ethics and copyrights, how crucial do you think policymaking and law enforcement is shaping the storytelling scene overall?
So I think that, you know, the advancements in artificial intelligence, some of these products that I mentioned, some of the reasons I mentioned them is because they've been around for a while. actually. So you can start seeing how they're working over time. This isn't new. What's new is with the realization of it being a threat to potential business, but also to being, it should not be classed as a replacement for the creativity of the human mind. Now, law is only just starting to get caught up with this. The law is not necessarily there yet. In some cases, like with the Actors Guild, it's using existing law. In other cases, you know, there's the whole discussion. This is why the Actors Guild of America is striking right now, is to start hammering out, what does this really mean? But the law hasn't necessarily caught up with all of this. And this is going to be an area that hopefully people rather than AI is going to be trying to figure out, because AI is also coming into law. It can do contract law fairly straightforward, for instance.
Crossing fingers, this will be for the benefit of us, at least.
I know. I took my dad to SpaceX a long time ago to meet Elon Musk, and we walked in
for his birthday.
For Father's Day. It was Father's Day for rocket scientists. And we walked in, and the entrance into SpaceX is the Terminators. And so I always think of that every time I'm thinking about where it could go possibly wrong.
Yeah, there's only one way to find out.
I know, like, we're going towards it, whatever. So we're gonna see how it goes.
Yes, wait and see. We have some this or that questions from the audience, actually. These are my favorites. So which do you think has more potential for enhancing the storytelling experience, virtual reality or augmented reality?
So yeah, this or that. The storytelling experience, I would probably say virtual reality, because then that's more immersive. But I think augmented reality, that's also a good thing, because I mean, that's I guess Pokemon. And to be honest, you know, the whole Pokemon craze is still happening. There was just a conference here in London on it. So, you know, I think they're both very different types of storytelling and interactivity. One is putting it over our world, and one is immersing you in a world.
Another this or that. So we were talking about traditional forms of storytelling, like books, films, theater. So do you prefer these forms or emerging technologies, VR, AR, immersive, like interactive installation?
Yeah, so this is where my bias comes in. So I watch 150 films a year, and I love a good film. Now, I really enjoy a great film in IMAX, in 3D, that's really, you know, in front of you. Now, interactive technology through virtual reality, wearing a headset and things like that, sometimes it's really interesting and sometimes it's really good, but I've had some really bad experiences in virtual reality, because I think it's actually, it can hit closer to how the mind interprets things. So I died once in a virtual parachute jump, and then went to go to try out a car, and the car door opened virtually through my body. So my mind interpreted that as that I had died and I was a ghost. And it kept thinking that for the next 36 hours. So I think there's a real responsibility there to create good immersive environments, but because it's so close, I think if it's done really well, it can really deeply immerse you into something. But there's a lot of psychological considerations that we have to think through when doing that.
Yes, and also on immersive technologies, like it is also used for things like to get ready for job interviews, for example, and that's I like that. We are running out of time, so I think I'm going to take a few more. When creating a storytelling experience, do you prefer to focus on the story itself or the technology used to tell it?
So I think I think things start from the story, right? I mean, that's what they're saying, is that when you're looking for a predictor for success, it comes down to the story. And even with The Last of Us being a game first, and then coming onto television, the key thing there was the story. That's why it got such high ratings, was the story, the characters, that engagement, the realism, the world building. So I think that has to come first.
Good. Now, going back to what you were telling me about your immersive experience, like, which do you think is more important for a successful storytelling experience, engaging the audience emotionally or intellectually?
I think we tend to respond emotionally first. So our emotions are the way that our unconscious mind communicates with our conscious mind. So emotions happen to us, and then we think about that. So I think you have to always tap into that emotional part. But of course, I like both, right? So even when I'm writing something, I'm certainly thinking about the emotions and how it makes me feel and what my unconscious is telling me about the story and the characters. But underneath, I weave themes and ideas and that intellectual side. And I'm sure I'm not the only person doing that.
So why not both?
Yeah, so why not? Yeah, but I think you need a little bit of both.
Yes. So the last question, if you had to choose, would you rather prioritize accessibility and inclusivity in storytelling, or the potential for cutting edge technological innovation?
Okay, I mean, I'm always going to be pro being inclusive, right? So, but in some cases, sometimes what you're doing is just trying to play with the technology. So, for instance, people have been doing, can artificial intelligence make a film? So I think in those cases, the tests are, can artificial intelligence make a short film? If you want to make a good film, please make it inclusive.
Please. And why not cutting edge innovation that is inclusive? Thank you so much. That was really interesting for me and inspiring, and I want to learn more. And there are some things that I would need to research based on the PowerPoint. And also we had a question on that. So is it possible if we share the PowerPoint with our audience?
Yes, absolutely. That's fine.
Yeah, thank you. So thank you so much. And I think we all agree that technology has turned the page, has turned a new page on storytelling, on modern storytelling. So thank you so much, Maria. And see you again at 12 p.m. UK time. That is 3 p.m. UAE time, in a new session about entertainment and branding. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much.